Hi guys, sorry if I'm really breathy today, but I've been ill and it's made me really breathy, so I apologise, but there's not a lot I can do about it. Today I'm talking about bottom watering versus top watering. There is no right or wrong way to water, it's entirely personal preference. There's pros and cons to both, but in terms of one being better for specific plants, it doesn't really work like that. Even African violets and stuff, they're not that bothered about getting their leaves wet. Yeah, it's better not to, and don't water them, don't overwater them. But in general, plants in the wild will get rained on. That's where a lot of them get their water. Yeah, some will suck it up from the ground, but most plants will experience rain at some point. So don't worry too much if you only top water. It's absolutely fine. The pros of top watering. I suppose the pros and cons depend on your setup, how many plants you have, that kind of thing. But in general, it's more convenient. You can just grab a watering can, water your plant until the water comes out of the bottom, and you've got a pretty good idea that the plant is thoroughly soaked. It only takes a minute or so, and then you're sort of done. There is a small chance the action from the water will wash away pests and things, but this benefit is, I think, kind of over egged. It's really not. Was that a pun? It's not going to do too much, but it will wash away any mineral buildup and that kind of thing. So that is worth considering. However, you can end up compacting the soil, especially if you just buy standard potting, like houseplant potting mix without any added perlite or anything. You can end up compacting the soil, which reduces the amount of oxygen in the soil, and that can cause buildups of bacteria that can cause root rot. Root rot, yeah, it comes from overwatering, but the reason overwatering causes it is it knocks all the oxygen out of the soil and allows the bacteria that causes root rot to thrive. So we don't want to compact the soil. But obviously, if you only top water, you can just stir up the soil with a chopstick or something, or add perlite to the soil, and that is not an issue anymore. Like if you solely top water, it's fine. There is the small issue that top watering can damage leaves. Leaves don't like getting wet, but as I said before, they will get wet in the wild, so it's not that big a deal. But if you can get those watering cans with the really long skinny spouts, so you can direct the water onto the soil away from the leaves. But again, don't panic if the leaves get a bit wet, but just try not to make a habit of it. You can end up with watermarks on the soil, on the leaves, which doesn't look great, but it's really the rot over time. The biggest problem with top watering is that it makes the top of the soil wet, and when the top of the soil is wet, fungus gnats love that environment. And I say this all the time, fungus gnats aren't that big of an issue for me, but I do tend to bottom water my plants. But even if I didn't, and I used to have a few, and they're annoying, but they're not harmful to your plants unless you have a lot. They're eating they're eating the decaying matter in the soil. The larvae will occasionally eat the roots of your plants, but that's not what they're looking for. That's not their food source. So don't worry about them. But if you don't like them, if they get on your nerves, then bottom water, because if the top of the soil is dry, then the larvae can't. There's nothing for them to feed on. So they just don't thrive. I'm not saying they'll 100% go away. You might get the odd one, but when you bottom water and keep the top of the soil dry, completely dry, you will have less fungus gnats because the environment just isn't quite right for them. I top water most of my plants upstairs, so in here I tend to have plants that are a little more. None of them are fussy about water quality particularly. So I've got syngoniums, I've got ponytail palm, rubber trees, my monstera. The only plants I've got in here that I really wish weren't are my hanging plants, because when you top water hanging plants, it's a pain because obviously the water drips out the bottom. I prefer to take them downstairs and soak them, but again, it's a hassle. Like watering hanging plants in itself is just a bit of a hassle. I will probably end up taking them out of the pots they're in, and maybe putting a saucer in the bottom and using the hanging pots as cache pots so I can water them without having to worry about water going all over the floor. Try and figure something out with that. Right, so now we'll go on to bottom watering. So Bottom watering is more convenient for me, but as I said, I've got a little space in my kitchen where I can put a tray of water and keep it there all the time. My boyfriend, when he is doing water changes on our fish tank, he puts the water into there, so it's always pretty much full and it's always at room temperature, so it's always ready to go. If I notice that a plant's dry, I can just pick it up and pop it in there and just leave it for however long. The information on Google, when I first got into plants, the information on Google would suggest that you left your plants to bottom water for about half an hour and don't leave them in too long. That doesn't work. It varies a lot on what soil your plant's in, how big the roots are, everything, just the general size of the plant. So I tend to leave my plants in until I see the top of the water. I tend to leave my plants in until I see the top of the soil is a bit damp. Obviously, if you're trying to get rid of Fungusgnats, then you don't want to wait that long. But it's not uncommon for me to leave plants overnight and they're still not all the way soaked through. So it's really trial and error. Don't worry about leaving them in too long and them getting overwatered. As long as you're not doing it too frequently, every now and again won't matter. Some plants like alocasia, they get really bad edema if you leave them in too long. But I've never had one that didn't recover. You can sort of see on the back of the leaves, you get like weird patches. But as I say, it's not a problem. If you want to try bottom watering and you're worried about overwatering, start with plants that are more forgiving, or that are in pots like terracotta. So if you do overwater them, they'll dry out quickly. And you can always dry the soil out with a hairdryer. Professional cactus growers, so cacti like a lot of water, but they don't like to stay wet, so they get watered and then the growers will blow dry the pots to take away any excess water. So you can always try that. Like overwatering every once in a while, like overwatering in one session isn't that big a deal compared to watering say every 2 days. That's when the problem is, rather than how much water the plants get at one time, because it will dry out. Right, so the benefits of pro-watering. So obviously we've got the flip side of the top watering in that you discourage fungus gnats. So if that's a concern, bottom watering is definitely the way to go. If you do have a lot of plants that have textured or fuzzy leaves that don't particularly like getting them wet and you're not particularly careful with the watering can, bottom watering gets rid of that problem. I do bottom water my African violet, only because it was very badly neglected by its previous owner, and it's been 2 years and it's putting out growth, but I do want it to bloom, so I try and look after it. I want to do everything right by it. Bottom watering can encourage the roots to grow stronger because they grow in the direction of the water. Now this can be a con because you can end up with the roots going straight to the bottom, circling around the bottom of the pot, and it looks like the plant's root bound, but it's not. And in that case you sort of have to untangle the roots and sort of repot with the roots further up. I've not really had a problem with that. The roots grow out at the bottom and I just tuck them back in and then we just go again. I do every now and again go around and top water everybody because you do run the risk of mineral deposits building up in the soil from fertiliser and just what the plant naturally excretes. God, what a gross word. So you do want to get rid of those once in a while. It's the same thing if you keep your plants in lacquer, you see all the salt builds up on the lacquer and you just flush it through. And it's the same thing, you're just flushing out all the salts and bad stuff that's in it. So if you do bottom water every now and again, not often, even every 6 months will probably be fine. Just bottom water everybody, just to get rid of a few of those salty build-ups. Another consideration is bottom watering can take time. If you've got a lot of plants and you care for them more regularly than I do, you may find that so I don't mind doing a little bit of plant care every day, but if you wanted to get everybody watered in one day, bottom watering would be a really inconvenient way to go about it. You could fill the bath, I've done that before, but if you're like me and have way more than a bath full of plants, you're maybe better off just going around and top watering everybody. It really depends on how you care for your plants, sort of your own routine. It's important when you get into plant care that you work out what works best for you. And another thing is that it can be messy. So top watering can be messy if you miss or the saucer overflows. But with bottom watering, obviously you get the drips on the bottom and you've got to move everything around. I keep a pot next to where I bottom water and I use it as like a cash bow when I'm carrying my pots around, but it can be messy and inconvenient and a bit of a pain. With some of my plants, I keep like a soup bowl under, instead of a saucer, I keep a soup bowl underneath, so then I can just go, I can sort of, I suppose it's like a cross between top watering and bottom watering. I just fill up the bottom and then leave it. I tend to do that in bigger plants, because if you did it in smaller plants, you would run the risk of overwatering them, and it's worth checking back in, say, 8 hours. Maybe if you did it in the morning, check in the evening that there's no water left. And if there's any, just get rid of whatever's left, because the plant clearly doesn't want that. But like I say, with bigger plants, it can take longer. You can go around with a moisture meter and just check which plants are still dry and which ones still need a little bit more water. Right, so yeah, I think that's everything about top and bottom watering. If you've got any questions, just leave me a comment below. I'm really sorry if this has been a weird video, but I'm really not that well. And everybody seems to like doing stuff, like all my neighbours are making noise and I'm like, oh, it's just awkward. So yeah, anyway, I will see you tomorrow. Bye.